But welcome. We are recording. If you've been hanging with us the last couple Thursdays, Fridays, we've been recording, streaming our podcast live on Facebook. And today we have a very special guest, which I'm going to introduce here in just a minute. But you are along the ride with us for this podcast recording. We're glad that you're here. So if you are catching this on Facebook, let us know that you're tuning in. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And we are going to get the show started. Welcome to Motherhood, Menopause, and Mayhem, the podcast where motherhood meets midlife mayhem and menopause gets real. I'm Carla. I'm a menopause specialist. I'm a mom of five, and always your go to for sharing way too much information. On this screen with me is my business bestie, Christine. We missed you last week. Welcome back. Tell us about you.
Oh, I love you back. I love you back. And we always have so much fun here. I love how we keep it honest and real. And I'd like to do that too. Christine Burke, I'm a certified coach, and I help women take back their body confidence in midlife and menopause. So we can do whatever the heck we want in the second act. It's all about redefining midlife for me. And I'm super excited about this topic because I have tons of conversations with women about sleep, and it probably is one of the biggest complaints, right, that women
Yeah.
talk about in menopause. We were just talking about it before the show, but I'm super excited to have Leslie here. So, Carla, do you want to introduce our special
I
guest?
will. Our very special guest, who is going to share some really great information around, as Christine was talking about, sleep and why sleep is, even though it's like the foundation, why it's so critical, things that it can impact. But really, really looking forward to this conversation because it does affect our well-being. It's often overlooked. Or maybe, just maybe, it's something that I was thinking about motherhood and midlife, but I think womanhood, that we just start to settle that this is just as good as it gets. So Leslie Duffy is joining us today. She is a registered nurse, a functional medicine practitioner, a hormone whisperer, and an expert at connecting the dots between stress, gut health, hormone chaos, and why your sleep or lack of it might be the reason your whole rhythm feels off. So Leslie, welcome to the show. We are so thankful that you are taking time for us today. I would love it if you would fill in the gaps if I missed anything on your introduction, and something that I didn't prepare you for, but I'm always intrigued when, and I might misspeak, but when someone is like in the medical field, you're a registered nurse and you shift, is it appropriate to say shift to functional medicine? I would love for you to share with our audience more about you and your journey.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. First of all, Christine and Carla, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. And yeah, so I think you got it all right. I am a registered nurse, long history of medical background, became a functional medicine practitioner because of my own health issues. Also a perimenopause, menopause certified coach, and like like a lot of things, like national board certified health and wellness coach, and blah blah blah, all the things. But the part of the thing that ties it all together is being a mindset coach. So what brought me to becoming going into functional medicine, which is functional medicine. A lot of people don't really know what that is, but if you would think of it as like root cause medicine and why is something happening, right? So I just got my car is in the shop and the battery is a lithium ion battery and it's totally drained. And I'm like grilling the guy. I'm like, why? Why is it drained? Is there, they call it a parasitic drain. Why is it not working? I need to know why so we can stop this from happening again, right? So and for us, it would be like if you have a tack in your foot, you go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Here's some Tylenol,"
Okay.
and instead of taking the tack out, right? So like
Yeah.
so that would be root cause. So in it's very common. I know I'm probably your audience is. I didn't even know that it was very common, but maybe some people in your audience have also come across this. As you get into your 40s and a little bit in there and beyond, we start losing certain hormones and the protectiveness, the protection, the inflammatory protection starts to wane. And I ended up with a autoimmune disease. And because of my science background and my medical background, I went to my doctor and got all the things. And he's like, "You're totally fine." And then I was like, "I don't feel fine."
Yeah.
And that's how that happened. I was like, I gotta, dig deeper. And I was like, I'm in nursing. I know there's got to be a better answer. So that's what I did. And from there, I ended up in functional medicine, only to find out I had a autoimmune disease so common, apparently, as you lose progesterone as we get into later perimenopausal years, very common to all of a sudden have an autoimmune disease because you don't have that protection. So that's what happened. And it changed my life. I needed a coach and I didn't have one. So I became that type of coach that I needed at the time.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing. Because I do see a lot of folks in the traditional medical field switching over to really wanting to understand the root cause and maybe some different ways of approaching things. So I appreciate you letting me kind of throw that question at you without
Totally.
any prep for that, but I appreciate that. I thought what it might be good to do, Christina, if you want to go first, is just for us to share our own personal stories, since this topic today is about sleep. Maybe our audience can relate to having some, like, noticing some different things happening with your sleep. We're going to uncover some of those reasons today. But Christine, what's been going on? Maybe you have great sleep now because you've recognized it and done something, but what has your journey been with sleep as
Yeah,
you've
well,
entered midlife?
I never had issues with sleep. And that probably
Same.
makes it harder when you hit menopause and all of a sudden you do have an issue with sleep. So, never ever. I would fall asleep in 5 seconds, be done, except when you go through that period of having children and you're breastfeeding, right? So, and I remember when my first child was born and I was having to be woken up in the middle of the night and I was in shock. I said, "You mean I have to get up multiple times?" Because I was such a heavy sleeper.
What is
So
this craziness?
yeah, I know. I was like, whoa, whoa, hold on a second. Anyway, perimenopause, that funky period where you don't actually really even know what's going on. My sleep started to get interrupted probably about 2 years ago, I would say. And just the never, not really an issue falling asleep, but this thing that I know Leslie would be very knowledgeable on is the waking up multiple times a night. And so not
Yes.
necessarily waking up to pee, but just the waking up. And so for me, it's gotten better because of the supplements. We know magnesium is great for sleep, and just starting to identify what I knew my triggers were. Right? Cortisol, we're going to talk about that, the stress, managing stress, and then alcohol was a big thing for me. I really just had to stop drinking red wine specifically because it was never a problem until I knew it was a thing that was preventing me from sleep. So yeah, I think, for me, it was just like, okay, well, what are the triggers for me? And just having that, sleep hygiene plan, which we're going to talk about. But yeah, it's a crazy thing. And it can make life miserable if you're not sleeping.
Yeah, for sure. I had a my journey, my story, if you will, is very, very similar. I can remember my best friend, like when we would have sleepovers or whatever, even into our adults. She was like, "It irritates me so bad that your head hits the pillow and you were legit out." And I'm still that way. But I do have, but by the way, I'm going to throw this in. I have heard, and maybe Leslie, you can confirm or deny this. I've heard that that's not actually a sign of good sleep. Like if you can go to sleep super, super quick, that maybe you're not getting the restorative sleep that you need. Anyway,
Oh,
so
yeah.
yes, I've
Yeah.
always been the one that falls asleep super fast and never had any sleep problems. Sleep through the night. I could hear my kiddos when they were babies, no issues there, but never had anything until about, I would say, 2 to 3 years ago, where it just was disrupted sleep. Uh, Waking up more often. I mean, I would toss and turn and I would go back to sleep, but not the good quality sleep that I was used to. And I really didn't understand that it had anything to do with perimenopause. I've shared before, I didn't even know that perimenopause was a thing. And now it is, I mean, I can almost set a time. It's between 2 and 4 a.m. The witching
Mm.
hours, if you will, between 2 and 4 a.m. I wake up. And sometimes it is to go to the bathroom for me. And sometimes I can come back and go right to sleep. last night, 3 a.m. I don't know. I was telling Christine, I don't know if it was because we're going to be talking about sleep or what, but 3 a.m., eyes wide open. I was like, okay, is it time to start my day? And you're right, it does throw things off. And I even have, I feel like a pretty solid sleep routine, like bedtime routine, if you will. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And Leslie, if you have anything to share about maybe you've had sleep problems, sleep quality issues, maybe not, but we'd love
Oh my
to
gosh.
hear.
Oh my gosh, I have like the funniest story. So I always was a great sleeper and I as you say, and there is like a link between like I mean like if you wear one of these like aura rings, they'll tell
Yeah.
you like, oh your sleep latency, it's like me, I'm like the type of person that needs to like get the A. I'm like checking off all the boxes. I'm like, what do you mean my sleep latency is not working? What do you mean I'm not having enough deep sleep? So of course it gets me down that rabbit hole. But yeah, latency is a thing. That means like you're just a little bit overtired if you're falling asleep too quickly. So, my story with sleep, my journey with sleep was that I was always a great sleeper. Then, I want to say 3 years ago, I started having a lot of hot flashes,
Mm.
and it was like nonstop hot flashes. Like I called them rolling hot flashes. I'm like, as soon as one ended, another one started. As soon as one
Oh,
ended,
wow.
another one started. It was horrible, and it happened at night too. And then we ended up going to Portugal for my son's graduation. And my husband ended up getting delayed back here in Charlotte. And so he was like, you know what? My other son and my husband we're gonna meet you there. I'm gonna cancel one of the hotel rooms. You and my son Daniel, who was just graduated college, are gonna have to share a room. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like waking up in the middle of the night. I'm like stripping
Yeah.
clothes. I was like, you can't do this to me. So I was like, oh my God. And so with like, it was very delicate. I was like, Daniel, I'm like, I got the fans. I called the hotel. I'm like, I'm gonna need fans. We're gonna need like a division or something like a screen or like it was horrible. And it just kept going. So in the end, thankfully, I think just our ability to kind of dance around like, all right, Daniel, I'm having one of those nights. And he would like kind of be like, okay, mom, whatever. And like, look the other way. But it was like really embarrassing. So I really don't recommend sharing a hotel room with your son when you're in the middle of those hot flashes.
Noted.
Um, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it does. Oh my gosh. And that was before I could do anything about it. And then once I got back, we were there for a little while. Once I got back, got on the hormone replacement, which really helps settle things down. But that does take a while. I don't know if any of your listeners have had that experience, but getting the right dose, making sure like having that on ramp of the hormones, it's not like an overnight or like you can start taking hormones and all of a sudden it's gone. It really does. You need to calibrate. So it does take a little bit.
That's a really great point, and I'm glad that you brought that up because whether it's hormone replacement therapy, whether someone is starting with some kind of a supplement, we are in this instant gratification. We're like, okay, I took that, I received it, now I should have everything should be solved. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, that it does take time for, I love the word that you use, calibrate.
Mhm.
And so it does take time for your body to absorb and to respond to what you're putting in there. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Mhm.
So what we were talking about prior to jumping on here was a lot of the, I don't know if we would say misunderstanding, not being aware about how important sleep is. I started the podcast off with saying, I think sometimes just as women, we just chalk this up to being like, we go through, if you're a mother, you go through a mother pregnancy and you lose sleep. And you're like, okay, that's part of it. You go through the infant stages of with your kiddos. And you're like, I'm just not going to sleep. And so we just grow to accept that, well, we're now in perimenopause or menopause. So I guess this is just how this is going to be. So can we maybe start with
Why
like
am I not
how,
sleeping? Just
yeah,
go.
what's happening that's causing me to, what's going on? Why can't I sleep?
Oh my gosh. Well, we can talk a lot about that. Um, there's so many reasons, but what I like to tell, I think what we all need to understand, because I even it was new to me, and I'm a nurse, and it was all new to me, is that if you think about your hormones as a triangle, okay, and if you look at your triangle, right, and at the base of your triangle, there's cortisol, there's insulin, and there's oxytocin. And then as you go up the triangle, at the very, very top of that triangle, there is all your sex hormones. There is thyroid hormone also. There's estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So if you think about it that way, the stability of those sex hormones at the top, or the other hormones that really do affect our day-to-day life, really does depend on the base of that triangle. The more stable you are with your cortisol levels and your insulin levels, it creates that health and robustness of the rest of your hormones. So it's this downstream effect. Well, if you're looking at the triangle, it's like this upstream effect. But that is where we really want to focus a lot of is um, the nervous system. And that's where cortisol, a lot of people don't realize that that is the stress hormone. That is what your nervous system gives off when and starts to secrete when you are in a dysregulated nervous system. And that's like kind of like that hot term right now, nervous system. It's really, we're talking about the stress response. So, you're walking down the street, you see a snake, or it's actually it could be a stick, and you think it's a snake, and like all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, that initial thing is adrenaline. That's like, boom, it's immediate. You can't even control it. But then that will trigger cortisol levels, which will be more kind of a longer, a longer burn. So that is what we're doing to ourselves every single day with driving, almost getting into an accident, the stress of work, the blue lights, all of these things that kind of contribute to this low level cortisol secretion. And so now we've got, as we get older, I mentioned that progesterone kind of decreases as we get, that's the first hormone that starts to decrease, and then your estrogen. But those hormones are now, they kind of work with estrogen hand in hand. When we're younger, they work better. As we lose the protectiveness of our hormones, we are more at the effect of cortisol. Now, what we used to be find stressful is for our body super stressful. Our cortisol levels are jacked up, which means more stress hormones. So that's what we mean by, this cortisol being at the base and that stress hormone. We want to focus on your nervous system and your adrenals. Your adrenals, which is part of that whole stress response. Because whatever you see in your brain affects your adrenals. So the brain contacts the adrenals and says, start to release adrenaline first and then cortisol. So that communication is key. And part of it is the physical stress of our lives, just our everyday lives.
Yeah.
The other one is our perceived stress of how are we perceiving things, our mindset, our self-talk. It could be situational, and as we are living in midlife, this is the crazy thing is that the older we are, just by the mere fact of living longer, we are exposed to more. We have kids that need support. We have spouses. We have elderly parents. So we have careers. So now we're in this high stress state for many, many reasons. Maybe the career is ramping up, or maybe it's coming down. Maybe it's lack of purpose. The kids are out of the house now. What am I going to do with myself? And so all of these things, my body is changing. I don't recognize myself. That's a huge stressor on women. Like I'm aging. That's another, all of these things. So we're in that tinderbox.
Wow.
And
So
I,
cortisol kind of just like takes over as your
yeah,
other hormones go down. It's like cortisol steps in and says, I'm in charge.
yeah. And I
Exactly.
appreciate that
Exactly.
you called out a couple of things that maybe women don't realize is our body is responding to it as stress. You mentioned like career changes, wanting to, you're empty nesters, things are just changing in your environment that maybe we wouldn't label as stress. And that is truly something that is putting the stress on our bodies. And like Christine says, the cortisol is just out of whack. So I appreciate you sharing that. Christine, did you have any follow up, any questions on the
Yeah,
cortisol? I'm
so
learning much about cortisol these days. So I love this part of the conversation.
I know, me too.
So, I mean, it seems obvious, but I'm sure it's not. So, if our cortisol is high, cortisol is the hormone that we don't want to be, dominant when we're trying to sleep. So, how does that process work? Because, we were talking before about melatonin and cortisol. When melatonin's high, cortisol is low. If cortisol is high, melatonin is low, and that's not great for sleep, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, cortisol's great. We like cortisol. We like to have cortisol. It gives, and stress is okay. It gives meaning to life. We're, the excited stress of moving to a new house, having a new career, or, all these things are makes life life. Um, and as we get older and our hormones drop, we're just not able to handle the effects of stress, cortisol as well. And how it relates to sleep is that we want to have a nice spike in our cortisol levels. Like we do have a cortisol curve. It's like the rhythm of a pulse, we call it a pulse or a rhythm. We want a nice cortisol pulse in the morning. And then as the day goes on, it kind of goes down, down, down. So it's like the ski slope, right? We're going to get down, down, down. And when you have high cortisol in the morning, that actually, the act of like looking at sunlight flushes out melatonin. All of melatonin is the sleep hormone, makes you sleepy. And that's affected by our retinas. So as the day goes on, the light starts to decrease, and then our retinas are identifying this as it's time to get ready for bed. I mean, think about it, like our ancestors, they would go to bed when the like, morning light and then go to bed when it's dark, and they
Yep.
would have a low amber light, which is a fire, right? So that in itself, like the brain is now starting to receive the signal, it's time to relax, it's time to sleep. Okay. But cortisol, if it spikes, it's going to drop your melatonin, right? So, like right before bed, we want to get that low, calm energy to start to get your brain signaling it's time to go to bed. So now that I'm going to say that this is the melatonin starts to lower. It's like I'm the mirror image, so I can't see. Like for people who are listening to the podcast, I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at my hands doing different things. So as the day goes on, we want that melatonin to start to go up. We want the
Mm.
melatonin to start to ramp up, which will naturally lower your cortisol levels. Okay. But if we're looking at blue light, any sort of light,
Mm.
fluorescent light, blue light, computer lights, phone light, that is, remember I said that's the receptors in your eyes that signal your brain. So now your brain is getting light that you might not ordinarily get in the night. You actually get it during the day. So now it's confused. Your brain's like, what's going on? It's daytime? Oh, let me ramp up my cortisol. Let me be ready for any threats. Let
Yeah.
me, so then now you're losing your core. You cannot have good melatonin and high cortisol at the same time. It's one or the other. So that's why cortisol is so important. We want to kind of lower that as you get closer to bedtime.
Love it.
Sounds pretty easy.
It's not. Although I do have tips for you. I got you. I got you. Don't worry.
Love it. What would talking about that, like if you're trying to get, your body, your eyes to start getting into sleepy time, if you will, into that
Yeah.
routine, what's one, like if you had to say one thing to get your body used to that routine that our listeners could do?
Well, my family thinks I'm bananas, but I literally run around the house and take off all the overhead lights, and I make sure that we have like dim lights in the house. And I'm like, and now my son has started also. So just start to lower your lights. Like that's number one. It's your eyes. You cannot hijack your eyesight and the receptors in your brain. Like, yeah, we want the brain to start to pick up that, okay, lights are getting low. So I take off all overhead lights. So I run out into the room. My husband's in with the bright lights in the living room, feet up, reading, and I'm like, room, and I shut the light off, and he's like, "What is happening?" He's so upset. I'm like, "You have to start making melatonin," and he does not appreciate it. But my
I'm your
son has picked
husband.
up on it. Yeah,
I'm the one that's
yeah.
like, I don't like a dark room. I want all the lights
No.
on. So
And I'm
that's good
like,
to know. Like
and
I
then
need to
yeah,
shut
and
those
then I
off.
yell at him. I'm like, well, don't complain that you have insomnia. And then my son, who is a student, and he's up all night. So for him and for me, what I do, because I stay up because of course I feel like I never can get enough work done during the day. So I will wear amber glasses or yellow glasses. And there is an app that you can get on to put on your computer that will change the blue light filter. It's called F-Lux. And I believe it's free. It was when I was looking at it. And that you can just download to your computer and it will shut off all that blue light so that, if you need to work for whatever reason, you can still, but we do have to be very proactive on that. It is a light, you cannot make melatonin without this.
That's a great
That's
thing
a
about
pretty,
the lights. That's
yeah,
a really good idea. I never would have thought about that.
very simple thing that we can all do.
Yeah.
We can do that tonight.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that also, like, I'm just going to interject quickly, like in the morning, sometimes we have difficulty processing and getting rid of that melatonin because it's been building all night. Like you want to get that light in the morning, sunlight, first 30 minutes of waking up. That is going to flush out all the melatonin. So that makes you ready for your day.
Got it. So if we could, I could stay on the topic of cortisol for the duration because I think it's something that is impacting me greatly right now. Christine, did you have anything else on cortisol before I jump to?
No, I had a couple questions about food
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the whole eating thing and when we should be finished eating
Mm.
because we don't want insulin going when we're trying to make melatonin, right? That was going to be my next question.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Well, I would say like we want to focus on women don't do well with fasting, so we would really just want to focus on time restricted eating, which would be like um, stopping, have your last meal before like 3 hours before you go to bed. And that would be because we want our resources to focus on, it's kind of like cleaning your brain, and when we're sleeping, we're actually doing like a drainage of our fluids in the
Mm.
brain. And that's a good thing. We want to be doing that. If we have food in our system, it stops that process. So we're not going to be cleaning the brain as much. And think about it like also, we want to train our brain to have that little bit of metabolic flexibility. Like, okay, now like you're going into a rest state, you're not going to be using as much energy. Um, and as they say, most of our weight loss happens at night when we're sleeping and repair. So it's repairing the brain, repairing our muscles, and focusing on recovery. As far as meal timing and that's concerned, there is a link between sleeplessness and insulin, Christina. So that's a good point. I do have clients who I will have them wear a continuous blood glucose monitor, and we have like this happened actually with a client recently, and she's like, and granted, like the higher your stress levels, it could be like you're noticing you're waking up a little bit more. You've got something stressful that's happening, and you're looking forward to it. Your brain is in overdrive. So that's like a little bit of adrenaline, but also it could be a little bit of a drop in your blood sugar. So that's another reason why you might be waking up in the middle of the night. And as far as that's concerned with insulin, let me just preface with like the higher your cortisol, the higher your blood sugar, and the more insulin you have. Like that's another phenomenon. Um, and at night when you're sleeping, it's if you're waking up between 1 and 3 in the morning. It's more like a liver issue, adrenal issue. You can kind of pinpoint between the time that you're waking up. Be like if it's a between 3 and 5 in the morning, you would probably think at that point it's a cortisol issue, like it's a stress. Your cortisol is peaking too early, and it could be because of stress. So want to start to recognize, what time am I waking up? Is it a stress response? What do I need to do to kind of create that calm and settle my nervous system and create that safety for your brain and your body to rest? So, one of my clients moved into a new apartment. She started having a lot of sleeplessness, and this is before we even got the blood glucose monitor. And I was like, in my brain, I'm like, she's probably dropping her blood sugar. And even a low blood sugar is an emergency for your body, and it's going to release adrenaline to wake you up and release the sugar. So now we're triggering cortisol. We want cortisol to come in because it's going to increase your blood sugar, right? It's going to take sugar because you're not eating. It's got to take it from somewhere. So you got to increase your cortisol levels to release it from your liver, for example. So in the middle of the night, if your blood sugar is dropping for whatever reason, um, it could be that now you've got this adrenaline spike and it's going to wake you up and make sure that your blood sugar gets back up to level baseline. That's why we
Wow,
have wakefulness.
that's really fascinating.
So
Yeah.
can I ask, because this is also my personal what is happening, and I think that we could go into insulin resistance and all that. That's not what we're here for today, but I do recognize that it impacts sleep. So you're talking about low blood sugar, and I do wear a continuous glucose monitor. I have the opposite. So
Mhm.
I've not eaten in 7 hours, and I get a notice that I have a glucose spike. So is
Spike.
that, yes, a glucose spike? And that has been the case since I was diagnosed. But is that something similar? Would you lay that into still something to do with cortisol? And I'm sure it's probably causing me to wake up. But I can understand low blood sugar, just the opposite of that. Is that something similar?
Yeah. So, what could be happening, and blood sugar regulation is also can be very difficult as we get into perimenopause, menopause. It gets more difficult. We really have to focus on a lot of things like muscle building and food timing, and it's like this whole big thing. But what may be happening, I'm not sure, is that your body is a couple of things. It could be that your glucose is spiking. Obviously your glucose is spiking. I meant your cortisol. Your cortisol is
Sure.
spiking.
Yeah,
There could be something spiking your cortisol that could be causing a high blood sugar.
sure.
And then if you for somebody in that case, I would look into food sensitivities. I would look into what are you doing before bed, how much sooner, like when are you eating? Um, and then also creating, if your body is having a blood glucose, it could be like a rebound effect. It could be like, oh, your body was actually low,
Mm,
kicked in the adrenaline, kicked in the cortisol, but now your cortisol has overshot. Like
gotcha.
you've done that too much. And like we're all the way up.
Yeah.
But one of the things that, when you have like a low blood sugar signal in the middle of the night, what I do is for those clients is I say, have a small mini meal. Like
Mm,
doesn't count with anything. We want to create like a little bit of fiber, a little bit of fat, a little bit of something to get you through the night so that your blood sugar doesn't drop.
I
And
see.
that can just be temporary until we get over a hump of like a high stress state, like moving into a new apartment, you
Yeah.
know, going through a separation, going through a divorce, having, all sorts of issues that could be happening as a midlife woman, of course. And that hopefully is gonna, and if it still continues, double that, double that. We just need to kind of balance that situation. For somebody who's having like those high spikes, then I would look probably deeper into things like inflammation, food sensitivity, food timing, higher fiber, higher fat, getting the time between meals, kind of like leveling that out so that your body's not going like this.
Sure. I think that's a good point too for anybody outside of the question that I was
Yeah,
asking.
sorry.
There's so no, no, no. There's so many things that can factor into what's disrupting sleep. And so you mentioned anti-inflammatory, like paying attention. And I say, I know that we don't always want to track things, but I swear by the continuous glucose monitor simply from you can see how your body is responding to certain things. And obviously it's going to show blood sugar, but it can show, I mean, it can tell you a full story. But what I was saying about that
Carla,
is,
let me ask you a quick question. Does it wake you up when you have a high blood sugar in the middle of the night?
it hasn't, no, unless that's when I'm waking up to go to the bathroom, and that is just part of it. But
Yeah,
I
that could be
generally,
an early cortisol spike. So
yeah,
that's like,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't notice it waking me up. I just noticed that when I look at my phone in the morning, it shows that I had a spike at like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and I'm like, I didn't even know. So, but you bring up some really good things about, and I think maybe your resources that you're going to offer to our audience will help them to identify some of the things that maybe we're not even thinking about. So if you're talking, and we'll make sure that they have access. If you're watching Facebook Live, you'll have access to what Leslie is offering. In the comments, if you're listening to our podcast, you'll have it in the show notes. But what would you say to a midlife mama, a midlife woman? She's in her 40s or 50s, who, and we'll kind of end things here, who feels like, I've mentioned a couple of times, like sleep is just something that she can live without. What would you say to her and help her to understand that? I know that this is another loaded question, but to prioritize sleep, and that it really it can be affecting other areas.
Oh, yeah. I think that of all the things, the one thing to optimize would be sleep of all the things. And only because it's just it goes across all aspects of quality of life. It's how you process your carbohydrates. It's how you process your insulin. It's going to affect your blood glucose levels. It's going to affect your cravings. It's going to affect your mood, which is going to affect your whole family, which is going to, it's going to affect your concentration, the ability for you to focus, your brain fog. It is your brain. It is like if we don't get enough sleep, you are literally hurting your brain. And believe it or not, Alzheimer's does not begin in your 80s, it begins in your 40s because
Yeah.
if you can focus on having that healthy brain, that's what we do. We want to make sure that your brain is getting enough blood flow, blood glucose, cleaning, all of that, because we want to be attentive and that's going to avoid dementia and any sort of things down the road. Blood sugar will, I talk about metabolism a lot with my clients because metabolism is not weight loss necessarily. It's also like your brain health and
Yeah.
your bone health and all of that. So it's like it's all related. So sleep, it's like such a big thing that I know that we have certain periods in our lives where we expect it, right? You have a newborn, you have a new puppy. It's like we can get over that. It's like when it's long, like we cannot. We need to really focus on that. My own mom was in her 80s, like she was suffering from lack of sleep and she got into a car accident. Like this is a real deal.
Mm.
Um, it it is a thing. And if you need to get a sleep study, get the sleep study, get a CPAP. There's no shame in that. Just get it all dialed in because that is the key to everything else. It all flows from there.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Christine, do you have anything that maybe we wanted to ask, didn't ask before we wrap things out for the day?
Um, I just a couple of things. If you could just expand on what like a sleep study might look like.
Mm.
What you said CPAC?
CPAP, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
what are those?
Oh, okay. So, a sleep study is where you go to a facility, and sometimes now they can do it in your own home. So, um, if you are struggling with sleep and you've done all the things, you're making sure that you're doing all, I wouldn't go straight to a sleep study unless I did my steps, and your audience is going to get that. There is fundamentals that we need to do in order to set ourselves up for good sleep, and it does start the beginning of the day. So do all those things. Make sure you're doing that for a good amount of time. You are your own experiment, your own science experiment. I'm not the same. My body's not going to react the same as Carla's or Christina's. So you're your own experiment. Go through all those steps. You don't want to go to the doctor and be like, I need a sleep study and take the time out of work and take the time. And then you get 15 minutes with him and he's like, have you done this, this, and this? And you're like, no. You want to be prepared. So,
Right.
right? Like, all right, I've done everything. Like, and I'm still waking up. And it could be periods of apnea, which means your throat could be closing. It could be you're not getting enough oxygen, and it could be waking you up. So that could be another reason why you have this wakefulness, and that can happen. It can happen just midlife. It can happen with anatomical issues. And so what they do is I've done all the things. Here's what's happening. I'm still waking up. They'll set you up with a sleep study, and you would either go to a facility and they would watch you while you sleep. You're hooked up to a whole bunch of monitors, and then count the number of times you've had an apneic episode, a moment where you don't have oxygen to your brain. Or you can do it at home. And so I'll tell you one really quick thing. I know we're kind of low on time. So my son, Daniel, the one I went to Portugal with, he was a horrible snorer. So I would be like, headphones, like the whole thing. And I'm like, Daniel, you have got to get to a sleep study. Please set this up. A year and a half later, 2 years later, because they don't listen, he finally goes to a sleep study and he gets it done, and they track it within an hour. And so like a moderate apneic episode, high apneic episodes would be like 30 episodes within an hour. Moderate would be like 10 episodes, or 5 episode would be like lower. He had, I kid you not, 80 episodes within an hour. And he's not overweight. It is a anatomical thing. His throat is too, this is a thing. I didn't even know this. And he's in his 20s. So like there are reasons. You've done
Yeah.
everything, right? Anyway, so that's what happened there. So like they're going to count how often you're not sleeping or you're not breathing in the middle of the night, and then they're based on that, they're going to give you a CPAP, which you wear over your mouth,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's the air quality, and it monitors your sleep, and it pushes air in so you do not have any lack of oxygen episodes, apnea episodes during your sleep. It's very informative. It's really, I would highly suggest it after you've done everything that just your habits.
Yeah. Fundamentals first.
That's right.
Fundamentals first. Yes.
Yeah, and so those fundamentals, as Leslie said, she's going to share that with. She's got a really great, dare I say, guide, kind of checking the boxes, if you will, just some things that you can start implementing right away, paying attention to those types of things. So she's going to share that with our audience. So stay tuned for that. But Leslie, thank you so much for hopping on here with us. It was a really great conversation, one that I think we could just keep going and going and going. But we want to make sure that folks are able to get connected with you. So we'll share that out with them as well. But I appreciate you for being here. It was a great conversation. For everyone else, we appreciate you for listening and watching on Facebook Live. If that's where you're catching us, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care. Bye bye.
Guys.
Bye-bye.